This is Myths and Sagas, where we explore the ancient figures who ruled the minds of the first civilizations, not just as legends, but as forces that built the world as we know it. In this episode, we turn to a god of the sky and supreme authority of heaven, who stood at the pinnacle of Mesopotamian mythology. Today, we discuss a Sumerian deity revered as the father of gods and the giver of kingship. His name was Anu, and in the ancient world, that name meant more than a god. It meant the vault of heaven itself. Over 5,000 years ago in the land of Sumer, southern Iraq, Anu was worshipped as the personification of the sky, the great sky father and highest god of the pantheon. He was especially revered in the ancient city of Uruk, which Sumerians believed to be one of the first cities ever created. In Uruk, an entire district was named after him. The older Anu district, dedicated to Anu, distinct from the newer Inanna district, dedicated to the goddess Inanna. Atop a massive mud brick terrace in the Anu district stood a shining sanctuary, known today as the White Temple, elevated high above the city. Archaeologists believe this temple was Anu's dwelling on earth, a symbol of heaven on high. Sumerian worshippers would have ascended its ziggurat to offer sacrifices under the open sky, effectively bringing their prayers closer to Anu's realm. The prominence of this temple, and the fact that it was rebuilt over centuries on the same sacred spot, shows how deeply the sky god's presence was ingrained in early Mesopotamia. However, as the millennia passed, the city's patronage shifted. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, grew in popularity until she eclipsed Anu at Uruk. She was given her own grand temple in the Inanna district, and Uruk became known primarily as Inanna's city. Yet, Anu was never forgotten. His temple and name endured, and he remained the grandfather of Uruk's gods. People understood that even if a more charismatic deity took center stage, the broad sky above still belonged to Anu. Anu's identity is tied to a cosmic family tree at the foundation of Sumerian myth. In their creation stories, the universe began with Namu, the primeval sea goddess, who gave birth to Anu, the sky, and Ki, the earth. Anu and Ki were originally united in a firm embrace, heaven and earth as one. Only when their son, Enlil, was born were heaven and earth split apart. Enlil carried away the earth, his mother, while his father Anu carried the sky upward. This primordial divorce of Anu and Ki made the world habitable for living creatures, separating the realm of gods above from the land below. Thus, by parentage, Anu literally emerged from the union of heaven, earth, and the primordial waters, a fitting origin for the god of the highest heaven. In Sumerian tradition, Anu's principal spouse was the earth goddess. She appears under different names in various sources. Ki in early Sumerian, later called Antu by the Akkadians, or sometimes Urash. But all these names represent the same idea, the female personification of earth. Anu, sky, and his consort, earth, embodied the universal parents of the gods. In one archaic inscription, even Namu, the primeval sea, is listed as Anu's wife, showing how multiple traditions tried to link Anu with the elemental mother figures. With his wife, whichever name she bore, Anu sired a great many offspring, essentially populating the pantheon. He was regarded as the father or ancestor of all the gods. Lists of deities often enumerate Anu's children. Major gods such as Enlil and Enki are sons of Anu. Anu is also the father of the moon god Nanna, the wind god Ishkur, the sun god Utu, the grain goddess Nisaba, the healing goddess Gula, and many more.
Even the powerful goddess Inanna Ishtar, who was often called daughter of Enlil in Sumer, came to be referred to as Anu's daughter in later Akkadian mythology. Essentially, if you trace the lineage of the great gods far enough, you end up at Anu. The assembly of the Mesopotamian gods was itself named after Anu. They were called the Anunnaki, which means offspring of Anu. According to Sumerian belief, these Anunnaki were the direct descendants of Anu and Ki, gods, born of heaven and earth, who were charged with decreeing the fates of the world. The oldest among them was Enlil, who inherited much of Anu's executive power. Indeed, until Enlil was born, heaven and earth were inseparable. Anu and Ki clung together. When Enlil split them, Anu ascended to the highest heaven and became somewhat removed from the day-to-day affairs of the lower realms. From then on, Enlil took over as active commander of the cosmos, while Anu remained the august patriarch in the background. This generational handover is a recurring theme.
Anu is the progenitor who eventually lets his children handle governance. Yet he never ceased to be the ultimate progenitor. Most Mesopotamian gods had a specific domain: the sun, the storm, the sea, love, war, and so on. Anu, however, stood for something more universal, the overarching sky, which in their cosmology meant the entire heavenly realm. He was An, the sky itself. He was revered as the source of all legitimate power, not only divine power, but human kingship as well. Sumerian and Akkadian texts often invoke Anu when discussing the right to rule. It was said that Anu bestowed heavenly power upon kings and even upon other gods. In other words, no crown was valid unless Anu's glory ultimately sanctioned it. Despite this exalted status, Anu was a remote and mostly passive deity in practice. People did not commonly worship Anu with the same personal fervor or extensive cult that they offered to gods like Enlil or Inanna.
There were few temples solely dedicated to Anu outside of Uruk,
and his name appears less in day-to-day prayers. Instead, Anu's presence was almost taken for granted, ever present but in the background, much like the sky itself. One might think of Anu as the ceremonial head of state in a divine government. He holds the title King of the Gods and is always listed first in any assembly of the gods. Yet he rarely issues direct commands or interventions. Despite Anu's aloof nature, the Mesopotamians always paid him formal reverence. Major inscriptions and royal decrees often begin by naming Anu first, alongside a few other great gods, to legitimize what follows. For example, when the Babylonian king Hammurabi issued his famous law code, he invoked Anu and Enlil at the very start, declaring that these highest gods ordained his rule and the establishment of justice. Later kings continued this tradition. Every city believed its patron god ultimately received kingship from Anu.
Every treaty or oath sworn by the gods had Anu as a witness at the head of the divine assembly. In a way, Anu was civilization's constitutional monarch, distant but essential for the cosmic order. Although few myths focus on Anu as a protagonist, he does appear in many stories as a decision-maker or initiator of events. One touching example of Anu's role as a just patriarch comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the beginning of that epic, the people of Uruk are suffering under the excesses of their king, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, though half divine and mighty, has become arrogant and oppressive. He abuses his subjects, taking sons from fathers and women from husbands. The people pray for relief. Their laments reach heaven, and it is Anu who hears their cries. Moved by their plea, Anu decides that Gilgamesh needs an equal, a companion who can confront him and teach him humility. Anu calls for the goddess Aruru, the divine creatrix who formed mankind, and gives the order. Anu essentially commissions a champion on the people's behalf. Obeying Anu's will, Aruru pinches off clay and shapes a wild man, Enkidu. She releases him into the wilderness. Enkidu is a hairy, untamed man who lives among the animals but possesses immense strength. You know how the rest of that story goes if you listen to the episode on Gilgamesh. In this tale, Anu acts as a compassionate problem solver for humanity. He did not personally descend or punish Gilgamesh. Instead, with a few words, he set in motion a plan to curb a tyrant by natural means. The fact that the Lord of Heaven took notice of common people's prayers is noteworthy. It portrays Anu as a deity who, while distant, is not indifferent. This myth also shows how Anu worked through other gods. He delegated the creation task to Aruru. In the divine assembly, Anu gave the command, and the goddess carried it out. A perfect example of Anu's authoritative, yet hands-off style. Another famous episode involving Anu is the story of the Bull of Heaven, which we also covered in the Gilgamesh episode. After Enkidu's arrival, Gilgamesh becomes a better king, and the two heroes undertake great adventures, even slaying the demon Humbaba. At the height of Gilgamesh's fame, the goddess Ishtar, the Akkadian form of Inanna, is attracted to him. She propositions Gilgamesh, offering to be his lover, but Gilgamesh harshly rejects Ishtar, listing the tragic fates of her previous lovers and insulting her. Ishtar, a proud and fiery deity, is enraged by this humiliation. She flies up to heaven to seek revenge. There she confronts her father Anu and mother Antu, demanding that Anu give her the Bull of Heaven, a colossal ferocious bull that can bring drought and earthquake, so that she may send it to destroy Gilgamesh's city. Anu listens to Ishtar's plea, but he is hesitant. As the wise patriarch, he foresees the disastrous fallout of unleashing this divine bull. In fact, Anu initially refuses, trying to dissuade Ishtar by pointing out the consequences. If the Bull of Heaven is set loose, Uruk will face 7 years of famine, because the bull's snorting will ruin the crops and fields. Anu asks Ishtar, "Have you prepared the people for that?" Ishtar, blinded by rage, asserts that she has stored up enough grain and fodder for 7 years and insists again on her demand. At this point, Ishtar threatens her father. She vows that if Anu will not grant her the bull, she will smash the gates of the underworld and raise the dead to devour the living. It's an alarming ultimatum. Essentially, let me have my revenge or I will cause a zombie apocalypse. Faced with this extreme threat, and perhaps not wanting a family schism, Anu reluctantly yields. He allows Ishtar to take the Bull of Heaven. What follows is catastrophe for Uruk. The Bull of Heaven is released and attacks the land. Each snorf of the bull opens huge pits in the ground. Scores of people fall into these chasms. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, being the heroes, go out to confront the bull. After a fierce battle, they manage to slay it, offering its heart to the sun god Shamash in thanks. When Ishtar stands on the walls of Uruk and curses them, Enkidu furiously tears off the bull's thigh and throws it in Ishtar's face as a final insult. The city is saved, but the story doesn't end happily. By killing the Bull of Heaven, a beast of the gods, and insulting a goddess, Gilgamesh and Enkidu have overstepped their bounds. The gods hold council. Anu, along with Enlil and Shamash, decide that one of the heroes must be punished with death. They choose Enkidu. Soon after, Enkidu falls ill and dies, leaving Gilgamesh to mourn and fear his own mortality, which becomes the focus of the rest of the epic. One of the most thought-provoking myths involving Anu is the tale of Adapa, sometimes dubbed the Babylonian Adam. Adapa was a mortal man, a sage and priest of Eridu, whom the god Enki had endowed with great wisdom. In the myth Adapa and the South Wind, Anu tests the limits of human fate. and we witness a scenario in which humanity almost received eternal life. The story goes like this. Adapa's daily duties included fishing to provide food for his temple. One day, when Adapa is out at sea, the south wind blows violently and capsizes his boat, dumping him into the water. Angered, Adapa reacts in a moment of curse and breaks the wing of the south wind. Yes, the winds are personified as beings with wings. As a result, the south wind ceases to blow over the land for 7 days. This unnatural calm draws the attention of Anu in heaven, who wonders why the regular wind has stopped. When Anu learns that a human Adapa was the cause, he is furious at the audacity. He summons Adapa to appear before him in the celestial court. Now, Adapa is just a human, albeit a wise one, and being called to heaven to face Anu is a daunting prospect. His patron god Enki doesn't want him to come to harm, so he advises Adapa very carefully on how to behave in Anu's court. Importantly, Enki warns Adapa not to eat or drink anything offered to him in heaven, telling him it will be the food of death. Adapa heeds Enki's advice. He ascends to Anu's abode. There, at the gate of heaven, he wins the favor of Tammuz and Gazida, guardian gods, with polite words, and they intercede for him. When Adapa comes before Anu, Anu asks, "Why did you break the south wind's wing?" Adapa explains his misfortune while fishing and how he cursed the wind in his distress. With the gatekeeper's support, Anu's anger cools into curiosity. Enki is a numbers deep down to a national earlier. For Adapa to be able to disable a wind of heaven, he must carry some divine wisdom. At this point, Anu decides to test Adapa's potential, perhaps even reward him. He orders that the food of immortality and the water of immortality be offered to Adapa. This is a dramatic moment. Anu is essentially offering a human the chance to become a god, or at least live forever. It's as if Anu is saying, let's see if this human can join the divine ranks. However, Adapa remembers Enki's warning. Believing the offering to be poisoned, he refuses to eat or drink. Anu watches in disbelief as Adapa turns down the very gifts that would have made him immortal. The myth concludes with Adapa's opportunity lost. He returns to live out his life as a mortal man, having unknowingly refused the bread of life and water of life that Anu had offered. Who then was Anu in the eyes of those who worshipped him and told his stories? Paradoxically, Anu was almighty yet distant, revered by all yet rarely taking center stage. Unlike Enki, the clever trickster, or Inanna, the passionate goddess of love, war, Anu's personality was not vividly fleshed out in myth. He is often an august, serene figure, intervening only in the most pivotal moments. We see hints of his character, just, patient, somewhat reserved, and unwilling to act in anger unless absolutely forced, as with Ishtar's threat. He generally prefers to delegate tasks, whether it's asking Aruru to create Enkidu, allowing Ishtar to use the Bull of Heaven, or letting Enlil decide the fate of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. This gives the impression of a wise elder who watches from a high throne and steps in only for the grand cosmic decisions. In council, Anu could be stern. He agreed humans should not all be destroyed unjustly after the flood, in the Atrahasis myth, and sanctioned Zaya Sudra, Utnapishtim's reward of immortality. But he was also compassionate. He heeded the prayers of Uruk's citizens, and he pitied Adapa and inferior humanity for our mortality. Anu's aloofness meant that ordinary people did not form a personal devotional relationship with him in the way they might with patron gods. Rather, Anu was honored in formal rituals and royal proclamations. When Mesopotamian priests and scribes compiled lists of gods or composed hymns, Anu's name always came first, as if to anchor the hierarchy. In terms of moral legacy, Anu represents the principle of order, legitimacy, and continuity. He is not a flashy hero or a romantic figure. He's the one who ensures the cosmos has a structure. By bestowing heavenly power on those below, Anu set a standard that rulership comes from a higher, divinely sanctioned source. This idea filtered down into later political thought. The concept of a mandate of heaven echoes that ancient notion that kings rule because the Sky Father allowed it. Additionally, Anu's reluctance to punish without consensus, as seen with the flood survivor Zayasudra's reward, or his questioning Ishtar's plan, gives us one of the earliest depictions of mercy and prudence in a chief god. Where Enlil could be quick to wrath, Anu seems more measured, and where Enki was crafty for the sake of life, Anu was stately for the sake of cosmic law. Some Mesopotamian commentators even grappled with Anu's seeming inactivity, as if to ask, what does the highest god actually do? The answer they arrived at was that Anu's very existence guarantees the stability of all creation. Without Anu, the sky would fall, the divine government would lose its head. In summary, Anu was not the kind of god who romped through adventures or directly thundered at his worshippers. Instead, he was the cosmic backbone of Sumerian belief, the lofty sky that upheld the universe, the font of divine authority, and the elder who presided in wisdom. Sumerians and their successors envisioned heaven itself as Anu's grand palace, where he convened the assembly of gods. When his name was uttered, it was often in formal reverence. To bless a king's reign, to start a litany of gods, or to swear an oath, by Anu. That enduring respect speaks to how fundamental Anu was. His gentle presence in myths, advising here, approving there, rarely condemning outright, made him a figure of awe, but not fear. People could look up at the clear sky and think of Anu, eternal, vast, and calm, watching over the world. That was Anu, god of the highest heaven, father of gods and men's kings, the ancient sky father whose legacy is the very concept of divine authority. From the earliest days of Uruk to the last days of Babylon, Anu's name meant power, order, and the promise that the sky itself guards the earth. Join us next time on Myths and Sagas as we journey to another corner of the ancient world and uncover the saga of another iconic figure. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Sumerian mythology, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more tales from the ages.